Paintings in blood, unearthed remains, and a former tortured roommate. These killers might be dead, but their secrets didn't die with them. It's really hard to downplay the popular obsession that's arisen around Ted Bundy, often painting him as this handsome, charming psychopath. While Bundy's popular legacy is a question in and of itself, that interest has also led to quite a few conspiracy theories regarding his true victim list. There have long been 20 victims attributed to Bundy, but many others are believed to have been killed by him. Indeed, it's long been theorized that Bundy's first potential victim was actually 8-year-old Anne-Marie Burr, and that he was only 14 when he killed her. As it turns out, people had good reason to speculate. Bundy had technically admitted to more murders than he's been officially charged with, one of whom was 17-year-old Deborah Kent. As far as everyone was aware, the teen had disappeared back in late 1974 during the intermission of a high school play, and she was never seen again. Bundy admitted to burying her body, even telling investigators the exact location, but her body was never found, at least not for many decades. In 2015, human remains were unearthed, and investigators combed back through old cold cases, discovering that a piece of a human kneecap had been found and given to Kent's family. Upon retrieving that bone from them and running some DNA analysis, investigators found that the body was indeed Kent's, confirming Bundy was her killer. A fact that was released to the public years later in 2019 due to a resurging interest in Bundy.
And I just feel bad that she had to suffer the last part of her life.
Israel Keyes might be the closest equivalent to a fictional evil mastermind that you could ever imagine. While only 4 victims have been identified so far, with a possible 5th still yet to be confirmed, Keyes is credited with killing nearly a dozen people between 2001 and 2012, and he planned out his crimes with meticulous care. Hidden stashes of supplies, long trips across the country to establish alibis, and macabre theater in which he posed the corpses of his victims and texted on their phones, pretending that they were still alive. Reportedly, he even planned on plastic surgery to make himself an even better killer. That whole approach might have had to do with his desire to play games with investigators, making deals with them for information. But the information well dried up when Keyes' name was released to the media, and he died by suicide in his own cell in late 2012. But it turns out there was more to the story. As finally revealed to the public in 2021, Keyes had left behind a number of things: a 4-page suicide note, as well as 12 paintings, all created using his own blood. 11 of those feature haunting images of human skulls. Those paintings were the reason investigators believe Keyes to be responsible for 11 murders. When John Wayne Gacy was caught in 1978, investigators could attribute 33 different murders to him. However, with most of them hidden away in the crawl spaces of his house, mystery still remained about Gacy. And until 2011, some 17 years after he was executed, there were still 8 victims whose names weren't known. But that year was the turning point. Back in the 1970s, the main way that investigators identified victims was through the use of dental records. But in the case of those unknown victims, there wasn't enough information to go on. However, when DNA profiling took center stage for solving crime, those victims were revisited, and 3 of them have since been positively identified. First was William George Bundy, a teenager who disappeared on his way to a party in October 1976. His family had long believed that Bundy had been one of Gacy's victims, but with the family dentist moving away and destroying their dental records, there was no way to confirm that. Then, in 2017, there was another breakthrough. In 1976, James Byron Hawkinson was a 16-year-old kid who had just moved to Chicago. Authorities now believe he was taken by Gacy the same day he'd arrived, though he couldn't be identified at the time, again due to a lack of dental records. And most recently, in 2021, Francis Wayne Alexander was identified.
I have no recollection of any of them.
While there's plenty of information about Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes, when it comes to the dark truth about Dahmer's time in the military, it would be remiss not to talk about the experiences of his military roommate, Billy Capshaw. Capshaw enlisted in the military when he was only 17 and was sent to Germany to work as a medic, where he was assigned to live with Dahmer. Over the course of the next 18 months, Dahmer worked to exert complete control over Capshaw's life.
He raped me, drugged me.
He kept the only door key to the room, leaving Capshaw locked inside, and he somehow managed to make sure that Capshaw didn't even have regular assignments that would take him outside. Capshaw was quite literally trapped, as Dahmer would regularly beat and assault him, forcing Capshaw to remain present for the torture should he try to disassociate, at least at times when he wasn't drugged.
I desensitized myself to it.
All he could do to survive was monitor Dahmer's moods. His superiors even refused to do anything when he brought the matter to them. The whole affair ultimately gave him severe PTSD and a lot of shame. Going by the numbers alone, Samuel Little can easily be considered the most prolific serial killer in all of American history. If you want the stats, after his 2012 arrest for his connection to a few murders that took place in the 1980s, he ultimately confessed to well over 90 murders, spanning from 1970 to 2005. With most of his victims being female minorities, sex workers, drug addicts, or others generally on the fringes of society, many of their cases were initially dismissed. Though further investigations have confirmed that he's responsible for 60 of those deaths. But that's still a lot of murders unsolved, and a lot of victims lost to history, especially with Little himself dying in late 2020. With that in mind, the FBI released a bunch of information to the public about a year later, including the details Little told them about his various victims. Unfortunately, Little also had a lot of trouble recalling exactly when and where any of those murders took place, so the hope was that someone might recognize the details and come forward with more information.
Grabbed her by the legs and pulled her to the water.
And as it turned out, in 2023, one of those victims was successfully identified using previously unsubmitted evidence. Yvonne Pless, Little's earliest known victim, who was killed in 1977 in Macon, Georgia. One of the miracles of modern science is the fact that investigators are able to uncover the truth behind decades-old cold cases. Serial murder cases, fortunately, are no exception to that, as proved to be true with Gary Allen Srery. There was a string of murders that took place in Calgary, Canada from 1976 to 1977. All 4 victims, Eva Dvorak, Patricia McQueen, Melissa Rahorick, and Barbara McLean, were young women who vanished under suspicious circumstances. For nearly half a century, answers proved to be less than forthcoming. But that all changed as the 21st century rolled around. The original investigators did take DNA from all the crime scenes, but at the time, it couldn't give them much information. In 2003, 2 of the deaths were linked, and by 2021, all 4 were linked to the same perpetrator. Genetic genealogy led investigators to finally identify Srery as the serial killer in 2024.
We believe there may be others.
Nonetheless, Srery didn't see any of the consequences of those crimes, as he died in 2011 of natural causes while still in prison for rape. The whole story of Albert DeSalvo comes with quite a few twists and turns, some of which came after his death in 1973. As things are widely accepted, the Boston Strangler's reign of terror lasted from 1962 to 1964, during which time 13 women were killed in brutal fashion. DeSalvo confessed to those crimes, claiming to be the Boston Strangler, but mysteries abounded, with many doubting whether DeSalvo acted alone. Closure seemed to come in 2013, when investigators could finally analyze DNA left at the scene of Mary Sullivan's murder. After making some progress by using the DNA of DeSalvo's nephew, they got a warrant to exhume the body of the killer. After running some tests, there was finally concrete proof linking DeSalvo with Sullivan, which seemed to indicate he was, in fact, the Boston Strangler. As it turned out, though, things weren't quite that straightforward. Despite the clear genetic evidence, skeptics didn't think this was enough to prove anything. While it proved DeSalvo was involved in Sullivan's murder, it didn't necessarily mean he was actually the Boston Strangler, or that he committed all those other crimes. And that was only further complicated when Daily Mail released exclusive photos of DeSalvo's letters, dated a couple weeks before he died, in which he claimed, "I'm going to drop a bomb." Evidently, he spoke out of his frustration with publishers and lawyers, and some questioned if he meant to recant his earlier claims, revealing that he wasn't the Boston Strangler after all. If you want a chilling tale, then look no further than Harold Shipman, the British doctor who did a lot more hurting than healing. While he was tried for 15 murders, estimates indicate that the real number might have been upwards of 200. As for how, overdosing those patients on illegally purchased morphine, then falsifying their causes of death in medical records. He managed to get away with it for nearly 30 years, until his arrest in 1998, and he died by suicide in 2004. When it comes to the murders, there are relatively few questions left unanswered. After all, Shipman left a trail, as his changes to those medical records were themselves being recorded. However, it did turn out that his own death was a bit more mysterious. In fact, 12 years later, secret documents kept by the prison came to light, stating that Shipman planned to be dead by his 60th birthday, so that his wife could be given larger pension payments. Not only that, but the report revealed that prison officials were well aware of this, taking note of his suicidal ideation. If you or anyone you know may be the victim of sexual assault, please visit the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network website, or contact RAIN's National Helpline at 1-800-656-HOPE. That's 1-800-656-4673.